In this C64 episode, I'll take a couple of games from my original collection of original tapes, and some that found their way into my collection on turbo tapes, which we spoke of in an earlier episode. Let's start with one from the aforementioned originals, Raid Over Moscow by Access Software. Like the two Beachhead games before it, Raid Over Moscow is a war action game in many different styles of segments. You start by launching special kinds of fighter jets from Earth's orbit, which you will need to guide to the city from which the Russians are sending their missiles. Then you need to get through a lengthy side-scrolling area, eventually reaching an area where you shoot the missile silos in a pseudo Space Invaders type of fashion. All the action happens in a slightly tilted top-down view, which gives some room for movement in all three dimensions. After you've reached the final city, which is Moscow obviously, you will get to play through two more sequences after the missile silo thing. In Finland, Raid Over Moscow was a huge hit when it came out, not least because of the controversy it created with our already fragile relationship with the Soviet Union at the time. It was probably the earliest moment I can remember from my personal gaming history where people started paying attention to what sort of subject matter computer and video games had. But even taking that out of consideration, Raid Over Moscow is an excellent example of what a computer action game could be from 1984. Ever since playing the Daley Thompson sport games on the ZX Spectrum, I've been a big fan of sport games where you need to get really physical. My favorite joystick waggler of all time has to be the Activision Decathlon from 1984. Well, actually the game was originally released for the Atari 2600 in 1983, but I spent way too many days and joysticks with the C64 version of the game to overlook it here. What makes Decathlon such a favorite for me is its simplicity. You only need to make sure you waggle the joystick fast enough and hit the fire button when necessary, hopefully at the very last possible fraction of a second. Other joystick killer sport games might have more sophisticated gameplay mechanics, such as the need for using the fire button for changing angles for throwing things or jumping, but here, speed and timing are everything. I remember being rather frustrated with the game in my early days, but it didn't take too long to find out a little trick, which only seems to work in the C64 version of Decathlon. You can make your athlete run faster, more easily, after you have once completed the 1500-meter race. After that, scoring more than 1,000 points for each event should be easy. But my favorite event has always been Javelin. Quick burst of waggling, super tight timing for the throwing, and with any luck you might get around 95 meters. But for that you need a proper joystick like a TAC2 or Wiko Ergo stick, something with a fairly small movement range and good grip. Great stuff. One of my introductory games to the C64 was a circus-themed multi-event sports-like game called Bigtop Barney, which I managed to copy for my own tapes with one of those double-deckers, if anyone remembers those. Naturally, I now have it as an original tape, but even thinking about copying games on a double-decker is a nostalgia trip by itself. Bigtop Barney has often been considered as a rip-off of Konami's Circus Charlie, but I always thought Barney was a much more original and interesting game. And sure, it has the tightrope section that all circus games seem to have, but the rest of it is exclusive to this game, and the fact that you can select to play the events in any order is a nice touch. The other event that closely resembles other default circus game events is the unicycle event, in which you need to bounce over or crouch under trampolines on a long distance. The only real difference here is the scrolling direction. Event number 2 is a platformer of sorts, in which you need to collect all the balloons from the screen. Event number 4 is an odd collect-em-up, in which you need to collect parts of a key by jumping around in an odd manner, since you can't actually stop Barney from moving around by anything else than colliding with the cage you need to open. or by losing life. Both events 2 and 4 have various designs, which alter after every completion, which gives the game a huge amount of longevity compared to Circus Charlie. As I learned rather late in the blog's life, Bigtop Barney was also released for the Amstrad CPC, and I wrote a correctional comparison of it sometime after wrongly including it on one of my unique games lists. Well, it still is a rather unique circus game, just not exclusive for the C64, but it definitely is better on it, and I tend to revisit it quite often. Giana Sisters. Didn't I already include this game on an earlier episode? No, I guess it was just the Let's Play video I made earlier this year. The chances of anyone who has ever owned a Commodore 64 and having never played the great Giana Sisters, or even heard of it, are extremely slim. It's Super Mario Bros. For C64, without it actually being Super Mario to such an extent for Nintendo actually forcing it off the market, which actually happened, in case you didn't already know. What I've always liked more about Giana Sisters compared to Mario is the level design, the collectible items and weapon upgrades, the plotline of getting to the end to wake Giana and Maria from a dream instead of trying to rescue a damsel in distress. Wait, what's the masculine word for a damsel? Oh, the soundtrack. Yes, I like Giana's soundtrack more than the much more classic soundtrack in Super Mario Bros. Matter of taste, I guess. I also like the fact that because of its limited time on the market, it's a collector's item in both its released versions, reaching stupidly high price tags on eBay and similar places. Whereas Super Mario is a household title, practically everyone who has an NES has it, and it has no real collector's value unless it's an unopened original version or something. Obviously, I also wrote a comparison of Giana Sisters a long time ago, so you can find the link to that below in the video description as well. The other game I decided to include here, which I've owned as an original tape from my early Commodoring days, is Paradroid. Andrew Braybrook's incomparable masterpiece doesn't have so much to do with graphics and sounds as it has in both the fluency and the complexity of gameplay. See, Paradroid is structured rather oddly. You control a droid, called the Influence Device, which is marked with 001, making it the lowest class droid in the entire game. The huge spaceships you need to rid of all the other droids are built into floors you access through various differently placed elevators, or lifts, and each floor has been made to contain enemy droids from specific classes so you can get your way through them with some strategic thinking. As 001, you obviously cannot destroy a 900 class droid unless you're very lucky, so you need to take control of upper class droids in order to make your job more possible. Taking control of other droids happens by engaging them in a minigame, in which you need to get more connectors in your chosen color than the opponent. A good way to start is by taking over a 300 class droid and going up from there, but anything higher than 500 class will be practically impossible to win over as 001. But the catch is, having a higher class means you're more likely to be fragile, even though you're more powerful. So the best way to get around is to stick to the 400 to 700 classes if possible. I admit that's a lot of information all of a sudden, but it all becomes clear once you actually get to play it a few times. Paradroid in its original form only exists on the C64 with a few updated versions, the Competition Edition and the Metal Edition, as well as the fairly recent Paradroid Redux, which is currently the best available choice. There was, however, a reimagined isometric 3D version for the Spectrum called Quasitron, which had some additional gameplay elements, and had a sequel called Magnetron, which was released for other 8-bits as well. The official sequels to Paradroid itself were Paradroid 90 for the Commodore Amiga and Atari ST, and Paradroid 2000 for the Acorn Archimedes, but none of them hold the same value to me as the original.